thank you, and I say a very special thank you to all of you that are in attendance today. There has been a polar vortex in the Chicagoland area. We have survived. We have sustained weathers that no other region on earth has made it. And I, like many of you, had some heating issues and challenges here and there, but we thank God that we are here today. We are warm on the inside here in Chicago, 930 East 50th Street, broadcast live in Chicago, Illinois. I asked my father, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, if I could speak today, and I thank him for this opportunity. He will be with you on next week. On this very first day, if you will, the second day of African American History Month, let us look back and reflect upon how did we get here. This is an incredible year. This is 400 years later of Africans in the America, in the United States. 400 years from 1619 to 2019. And I must say, this only empowers me. I know who's in Washington, I know who's in the United States Senate, and I know who's in Virginia. But I also know and believe that there's a God that pushed us, shielded us, protected us, and has us on a divine course for our destiny. Here we are in 2019, headline news of what's going on in Virginia. Well, let me tell you one thing about politics, if you will. And some people say you can't discuss politics with family, friends, don't deal with money with family or friends, don't talk religion with family or friends. I would say the exact opposite. If you want to know who your real family is spiritually, if you want to know who your real friends are, if you want to know the substance of people, have this difficult conversation and you'll understand where people stand. In the words of Reverend Martin Luther King, not in times of comfort and convenience, but in the moments of challenge. We supported Brother Bill Clinton, although he was in support of 3 strikes and went against welfare reform and other things that raised the mortality on many people. The alternative was worse in George H.W. Bush and the right wing and Take Back America with Newt Gingrich. They're never perfect choices. So I tell the young people, don't get bitter, don't get caustic, don't turn on the people that are fighting for you. Governor Nordstrom, you see the blackface, which is wrong. You see the Klansmanhood that is wrong. But you also have to understand, during the time of the election, it was versus a gentleman that said nothing against the death in Charlottesville when Heather Heyer was killed in Charlottesville. He took an African American on as his lieutenant governor. He's had an outstanding career in the military. He has been of service. But having said that all, now that the video is out, now that the pictures, and now that we are clear, we have to have as much passion as getting rid of blackface, getting rid of Klansmen, getting rid of Nazis, and it's time for Governor Nordstrom to go. We can't harbor it, can't understand it, can't apologize for it, and I'm sure he can continue to do some public service, but he should not lead the great state of Virginia. The great state of Virginia, 400 years later, in its soil, it's soiled. Couldn't help but think about my grandmother, Miss Gertrude Brown. Couldn't help but think about Dr. Carter G. Woodson, both of whom come from Virginia. Why are we here today and why are we talking about African American History Month? The founder of African American History Month is a gentleman, Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Dr. Carter G. Woodson comes from Virginia, Newton, Virginia. He was unable to get a formal education in Virginia because his family were miners, African Americans. He had to work. Born in 1875, died in 1950. Dr. Carter G. Woodson could not formally go to school until the age of 20. I want you to see how God worked through Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Went to school at the age of 20. Had to have his big hands and long knees underneath a small little table and a chair in a school with children. From there, he graduated early because he was continuing to teach himself how to read. After he quickly graduated, he went on to high school, having made his family money, then went on to Berea College in Kentucky and graduated. Then he came back to teach. Educators, he went back to teach into the same school system that did not allow him to get an education. We've had a history of lifting as we've climbed. I am so tired of many of our educators padding the payroll, talking about my days off, talking about my pension, talking about what's wrong with the school system. We need an educator that's on fire, that wants to teach. Stop fixing the blame, fix the problem. And there are enough of us to fix the problem. He went back to teach. He didn't need a salary to do that. From there, he came to Chicago. A man that went back to school, that did not have a formal education, that could not go to school until the age of 20, went on to get a college degree, went back to teach, then went to the Philippines to teach as a supervisor for 4 years. Dr. Carter G. Woodson came to Chicago to get an undergrad degree at the University of Chicago, just down the block from here. Went on to get his master's from the University of Chicago, down the block from here. Lived in Bronzeville to start Negro History Week. I know we've got some cynical people. Why is Black History Month only in the month of February? Chill out. No great conspiracy there. Why did the founder put Negro History Week and then go on to have it African American History Month in February? He did it in dedication to the birthday of Frederick Douglass and to the birthday of Abraham Lincoln. The founder of African American History Month wanted to make sure that we would study it all year long. What did he find by the time he went to Harvard? By the time Dr. Carter G. Woodson went to Harvard, he is the first African American descendant of slaves to get a PhD from Harvard. When he went through the annals of history and he was looking for the contributions of all people, he saw deletion, no credits for African Americans and our substance and impact to the history of America. His quote is, how can a people value themselves and others value them when they see no meaningful contribution that they've ever made? He knew that when you have inaccuracy, when people had focused on the white on the page and deleted the blacks off of the page, that you would end up creating hysteria. So what did Dr. Carter G. Woodson do? He sought to go back and archive our accomplishments and show that we've always been here. To go back to show when John Hancock and Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin met, that there too was a young child, Phyllis Wheatley, that was 8 years old, that had been kidnapped, that they had to approximate her age because of the size of her teeth, that had been kidnapped from West Africa, that was the first African to be manumitted, to be absolved of slavery in the Americas. He wanted it codified and put down on the record. Dr. Carter G. Woodson saw a time in history where there would no longer be the need for African American history. Mr. Jackson, that's incredulous. Why would you say that? He's a historian. He wanted to see history told correctly. You cannot have history if you have deletion and distortion. That's called propaganda. When we have our true credits in history, it's one American history. When you have one American history, you don't say Sally Hemings was a slave and that Thomas Jefferson had an affair. You say that Thomas Jefferson was raping and molesting a woman. And that Thomas and Jefferson had children by a woman that he had enslaved, and he sold his own children. And Thomas Jefferson is now credited for having freed the children he had with a woman. It's a complicated history. But 400 years later, we have a forum where we can speak truth to power. We're going to comfort the disturbed and disturb those that are too comfortable. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, then he went to Harvard to get his PhD and was on a mission publishing the Negro Week. You've heard of the book, The Miseducation of the Negro? Now, you can't tell me Dr. Carter G. Woodson isn't brilliant. His first book was The Education of the Negro. Knowing how our minds work, our culture, our attitude, and the things that bother us, he saw that book didn't sell. So then he had to write it in the negative, the miseducation, because people weren't interested in the education. He went on to tell us in that book, the Negro that is in the ghetto cannot rely upon the hand that's put him in the ghetto to get him out of the ghetto. He went on to tell our children that went on to get masters and PhDs, you must first master the business that your parents have created. If your parents have a banana cart, you expound upon that and you sell more bananas off that cart. How do you get an MBA? How do you get a PhD? And you sit at home passing out your resume, emailing it, texting it, Twittering, but you can't make income. Don't lose and have false pride. Go to work. Got a degree and say, I can't find no work. Then he says, and Dr. Carter G. Woodson, then make some work. He says you can start and you can go 8 blocks around your house and you can become a millionaire working just within your neighborhood. You can do the grounds in the summer. You can do the snow in the winter. You can learn how to fix and repair a house. You can have a store at the end of your block. You can learn how to do hair. You can learn how to do a weave. You can learn how to do a sew-in. You can learn how to do a nail. To be industrious in your own neighborhood. Dr. Carter G. Woodson taught us a lot. Let us not get it confused and say this was Negro history. It's American history made whole. He wanted to play the black and the white keys on the keyboard. He wanted the flats and the sharps. He wanted to see a nation moving together. What do we have in Virginia today? Oh, Virginia. When I think of my grandmother, born and lost her parents at the age of 12, 13, an orphan child, having to be raised by the neighbor, having a child at the age of 14, having gotten married by 20 and having 5 of her children, having worked at the VA and the hospital in the kitchen. While I was in college in 1988, my grandmother was in college. My grandmother went back to get her GED in Virginia when she was age 55. I'm giving a very clear message to some seniors and to some mothers and to some grandmothers. Dr. Carter G. Woodson told us there's discrimination, there's racism, but guess what? Superior talent will win out. They can cheat on the goal line, they can cheat on the scoreboard, but when you have a Cam Newton, when you have all of our great quarterbacks, when they keep showing up, you can't deny the talent. You gotta be better. I'm not mad at it, it ain't right, but I'm not gonna turn back time. We're gonna fight and move forward. Where's the fight? And brothers and sisters, let us not turn on each other. I was out with a friend last night, Brother Cecil Guyton. He asked me to come to bury his young nephew, Javon Britton. As I left my house on the south side and went down Stony Island and on I-57 and got to Murchison, beautiful south suburban neighborhoods, lovely houses, great families, rich central high school. And to see a child 18 years of age in a casket. To have to hug the auntie. And I shared with her, I really don't want to enter the sanctuary now because seeing these children in caskets just hurts me. And she said to me, how do you think I feel? To sit there and to see the mother having to bury her young, handsome child who had just gotten his certificate to go to trade school, that was looking forward to graduation this spring in a lovely south suburban of Chicago high school and community. To see his classmates with their head down, to see his nieces and nephews, and also to see a brother Cecil Guyton. He says, Jonathan, I want you to come. I want you to be a part. He says, I've had many opportunities and many family members to die from gun violence, but I want to turn this into something now. Cecil's just looking for a few good men to join him. His nephew was killed on Reverend Martin Luther King's birthday holiday in Orland Park Mall by another child 20 years old. And to see a man and a family with so much compassion, they said, we're hurting. And to see the preacher at the church say, this family's hurting, but we know the other family's hurting too. To see the preacher say, they lost their child and we've lost ours. Cecil, when he comes back, we're going to start working. My father, the Reverend Jackson, has told us we need to have vigils and assaults and marches, demonstrations against this gun violence. It's a scourge. It's an epidemic. We need to call in the Center for Disease Control to look at this hatred, to see where it's coming from, why our children are killing each other. And while the Center for Disease Control is here, we need to put racism on trial. For a man in 1984 in Virginia to be in medical school, to go into the military, to didn't find anything wrong and can't recall if he was blackface or the Ku Klux Klan. We need to have a war on this violence at home. We need to take this to the next level. What would Dr. Carter G. Woodson think of us now? When I think of my mother and my grandmother in Virginia, I graduated from North Carolina A&T in 1988. My grandmother graduated at the age of 63 from Hampton University at the age of 63 in 1988. My grandmother went on to get her master's at the age of 65 in Virginia. My brother Junior joked with her and said, Grandma, it's kind of late for you to start career planning, isn't it? She said, son, I had different life circumstances. She said, I worked in the kitchen all my life. She says, but I never wanted to be there. And I've always wanted an education. Can we say that today? Do our children have that burning desire to want to destroy ignorance 400 years later when you could not read a book, and now some boast about never having read a book? In the name of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, right here in the city of Chicago, we can start a values transformation. I remember talking with Spencer Leak Sr. as I saw his son, Spencer Jr., working that funeral last night. I couldn't help but give young Spencer a hug. I said, how do you do this? And his head heavy and hair gray now, he just shook his head. He said, it hurts to close the casket on these young children. And it's happening every day. And I think far too many of us have become too insensitized. The volume. Children aren't supposed to bury their classmates. You're supposed to graduate with them. When our public officials turn a blind eye, you heard one of the mayoral candidates say, we offered to give Amazon $2.3 billion. Here's the problem I'm going to have going forward on many of these candidates. I'm going to have a 365-day campaign reminding people of everything they said. You can find $2.3 billion right here in the city of Chicago to offer to give to a company that rejected it and said, I don't want it, I'm not coming here, I've gone on some other place. Now when we say it's time to hire 50,000 children for the summer, you say we don't have any money. We need to think big and ask big and demand big. We've got our governor in place. We've got our county board person in place. We're going to have the mayoral candidate we want in place. What are our demands and what are we going to hold their feet to the fire on? We've got a new city council coming into being. We've got to put some demands on the table. Stop turning on each other, turn to each other, and let's go for the bigger picture. My father wanted us to play this video today of Jackie Robinson. I am going to stop now and pick this up sometime really soon. We're going to stay on African American history, on the black and the white. We're going to talk about John Brown and the good that he did for America, the Abraham Lincoln. We're going to talk about those whites that made progress for African American history. And we're going to highlight some of the Negroes that were doing the bidding for slave masters and plantations and overseers that keep their foot on our neck on behalf of an old system. It's not about the personality, it's about the principle. Now I'm done. We're going to turn on the Jackie Robinson video, and please stay.